This is Joe Wong. Welcome to the Trap Set. During the age of social distancing, we're recording remotely and releasing episodes every day. Today's guest is Kaitlyn Aurelia Smith. Kaitlyn has a formal background in sound engineering and composition, and I gleaned from our conversation that she's also a seeker with a deeply curious mind. These qualities inform her beautifully meditative, vast and vivid soundscapes. Kaitlyn's new album, Expanding Electricity, will be released on May 15th. She spoke to me from her home in Los Angeles.
Hello.
Hey, Kaitlyn.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, it's Joe.
How's it going?
It's going okay. How are you?
I'm well. It's a beautiful day in LA. Where do you live?
I'm in Pasadena, far away.
Oh, nice. You know. Yeah. Yeah, it's really beautiful right now.
Do you have space outdoors where you can hang out?
A little bit. It's not my own, but it's a shared spot between like 6 different houses, and our landlord is very much into landscaping, so there's a really nice little creek that he made and like a grassy area. It's very lovely.
Is the way that you're spending your time right now during coronavirus distancing any different from how you would be spending it under normal circumstances?
Yeah, about half of what I would normally do is different. I would normally spend a lot of time hiking and going to the beach and hanging out with friends, and then I take classes a lot. And so all of that stuff kind of just got shifted since in LA, all the parks are closed, so you can't go on any of the trails, and you can't go to the beach. So I'm doing a lot more neighborhood walks, and then my classes all got shifted to online, and then I'm only seeing my friends through the phone. But luckily, one of my very close friends lives in the house behind me, so we can talk to each other from our porches.
How is it affecting your mental health to be cut off from people?
It's interesting because I haven't felt any loneliness. I also don't live alone. I live with my husband. And I haven't felt loneliness, but I felt a lot of sadness just for feeling lots of perspectives at once. Including my own perspective, but then also just thinking about all the people who maybe are isolating alone, or who don't have food available to them, or don't have a job and aren't able to see their friends and family, or have coronavirus. And so I go through that feeling a lot, and I go through more recently feelings about like what's the future going to be, and what are things that I can do now to adjust for how this is going to change my relationship to the world around me, and a lot of times I feel hopeful, and then sometimes I don't, and I feel the the like collective sadness and worry.
So how do you
I'm
answer
human.
that question personally, as far as how you will change your relationship to the world in the new paradigm?
It's, I haven't really fully heard the answer for that yet, but I'm making small steps and adjustments. I started recently shifting my practice of I oftentimes, besides music, do these sessions called medulla pressure point therapy, and I started to shift those to online, and have also started offering creative consulting sessions, and then a mixture of the two together, where you're learning how to use music and listening to understand your subconscious mind, and that's actually been kind of a new addition of like of starting to do those sessions where I'm mixing the two, and doing those online more regularly, and that's been an adjustment I've been trying to make, and of course doing like the live streaming shows. I'm hoping at some point that expands into figuring out how to still present an experience for people, but also have it feel just a little bit more than just a live stream. But I don't have that answer yet.
What exactly do medulla pressure point sessions entail?
Yeah, well, it's different now because they usually are in person, and it's 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 kind of hard to explain exactly like where I'm putting pressure, but it's at the base of like your brainstem, like where your medulla is, and I'm feeling your electricity, and I'm feeling how the electricity is flowing in your body, and asking questions and helping you learn how to have a conversation with your subconscious mind, and and using the pressure points to kind of direct where there might be stuck energy in the electricity, or there might be a trauma in the electricity, and so now the sessions are more about using music as a way to hear what's going on in your subconscious, and it's a series of like listening exercises and how to access your creativity, to help you further understand your subconscious.
When did you start getting interested in having a dialogue with your subconscious mind?
It kind of happened naturally. I've always had a love and fascination with listening, and just sitting in a space and listening to all the sounds around me, and it got more insular as I got older, just meaning that when I would sit and listen, I started to close my ears, and it started to be more inner listening. And then, one day, one of my thoughts that I was listening to asked me to interact with it, and so I was like, oh, I'm going to try this, and I started having a conversation with it, and then just fell in love with the idea of like, oh, we can interact with our subconscious, and started researching some more about it, and learning just different techniques from practicing them as well.
What's your earliest memory?
Well, actually, it's funny because that question came up recently. My mom asked me that, and when I told her the memory, she says that I wasn't born for it, but I'm pretty sure that I was alive for this memory. But I remember my mom receiving the news that her sister passed away, which in my mind, I was a baby, but there's still some conversation that needs to be had on when that actually happened. But that's the first one that comes to mind.
You didn't happen to Google your aunt's obituary so that you could verify when she passed away?
No, this was really recent that we were talking about this, so I haven't done that yet, but that's a good idea.
But it's interesting because that just tells us about the nature of memory and how sometimes they're, self-constructed and sometimes they're constructed out of details that we remember.
Yeah, yeah.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up on Orcas Island.
Which is off of Washington?
Yeah. Yeah, and I would go between Orcas Island and Southern California. My mom was going to school in Southern California, and because I was doing homeschooling, and I was the youngest of the children, she would bring me with her.
Oh, okay. And then how much older were your siblings?
I have a sister who's 12 years older, and then a brother that's 10 years older, and then another brother that's 4 years older.
Were your family members musical people?
Not really. My mom would sing a lot, but we didn't really. I mean, we listened to music sometimes, but no one was a professional musician or played instruments that often, except for my mom.
What did your mom play?
She loved to collect instruments, and she would play the piano sometimes and the harp. And it's always been a very private thing for her. She doesn't share that often.
So did it feel awkward to you when you started sharing your music?
No, not at all. They were really welcoming to it. I had a lot more resistance than they did. I would have everyone sit in a dark room, and I would turn my back to everyone before I would perform.
Huh. So I wonder what your subconscious was telling you in those moments.
I know. Oh yeah, I've gone down that one a lot.
So what did you find out?
I mean, I've had a long pattern in my life of not wanting to be seen, and that's kind of something that actually this album that I just released was a really big journey for me to learn how to overcome that, because my whole life I've always tried to put things in front of me, or just have been really resistant to being seen, and so it was a big step for me to work on the postures that I did for like the album cover of the new album, and to be in a video for it. It was like it took a lot of work for me to get to be okay with it.
What did that work entail?
A lot of putting myself mentally in the place of being seen, mentally and physically. I mean, it was a lot of going to classes that would make me be on the spot performing in front of people, like in a improvised way or just in a performance way. And my whole musical life, I've always put instruments in front of me. And so to go to these dance classes where I had nothing to hide behind was a really big step. And then I would meditate on putting myself in that position and just talk to the resistant side of myself and ask it questions and find out, where that fear came from and why that fear is there, and what tools do I need to prepare myself so that fear can let go, and just a lot of that dialogue.
The underlying theory being that resistance is there to protect you from, something that may have happened in the past. happening again.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, it was and is a lot about feeling prepared and feeling like I know the right steps to take to move in to progress at a pace that I'm okay with.
Right. And like you could argue that maybe the need to be prepared is another protective measure in a sense, right? Like because you're never 100% prepared if you're going to make yourself vulnerable like that in front of
Yeah,
people.
no, totally. And that's one that I've had lots of conversations about within myself as well. And the current answer that myself and my inner self have landed on in this current moment is that it's constantly this dance. And so the preparation is feeling like I know the move so that I can collaborate with the universe around me, and it doesn't feel like I'm just passive and everything's happening at me, and it doesn't feel like I'm like asserting myself and doing everything. It's like this constant back and forth. And there's definitely a lot more to investigate there, but that's currently where we're at.
I mean, I can identify with what you're saying because I'm primarily known as a drummer and
Yeah.
as a composer. And I recently made an album that I'm singing on and played a show where I was only singing. And so,
Yeah.
you know, as a drummer, there's an apparatus in front of you to obscure you. It's
Yeah.
like a literal barrier. But then beyond that, there's kind of like a psychic barrier in that, you know, I've studied that instrument for a long time and feel comfortable on it. So I was protected in that way too. Like I had a certain skill set that felt like a protection. So then going and singing and putting my own ideas out there was very scary and very vulnerable.
Yeah. 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 I know. Don't you also feel like, I don't know, I started to fall in love with that feeling recently of that vulnerable feeling because it it feels like such a deep potency
Yeah,
to learn
it's like
like what's next.
well, it's probably the most valuable creative currency, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like what you were saying before about, you know, if you know the steps, then you can have a collaborative relationship with your environment or the universe. Then maybe the next thought after that is, well, maybe you don't need to know the steps. Maybe if you know the steps too well, then that's a reaction in and of itself, in a sense.
Yeah. I know. I feel like it's kind of like training wheels where it's like I guess I can only, or not only, but right now I'm connecting it back to like the physical practice that I've been practicing, which is hand balancing and back bends, and for the more advanced moves, you learn like by holding certain props, and so it's like you're learning the steps until it becomes like a more fluid language in your muscle memory, and then it's like you can safely like use that information. And it's kind of like that with any language, I guess. Like you learn the building blocks, and then you get to communicate. And and so it feels kind of like that, where it's like the steps are like the training tools.
Tell me about being homeschooled.
Yeah, what do you want to know?
Do you know why your parents chose to homeschool you rather than putting you into a traditional school?
Yeah, so it was actually considered independent study, which is different than homeschooling, but I use homeschooling because it's a more like well-known term.
So, meaning you
But
were getting certified through a school system, but studying at home?
Yeah. Yeah. And I would study with mentors. Like I studied with a film composer. And when I was younger, I was really into horses. And so I studied at farms. And then I would spend some time going to school and trying out different schools. And then I went fully into independent studying my last year of in my teenage years, and then finished school early and went to college around 17. So it wasn't that much earlier.
Where did you go to college?
I went to school in Boston at Berklee College of Music.
I went there for a couple of years.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, neat.
So
what years?
I was there from 1999 to 2001.
Okay, so just before me. I was there 2004 to 2008.
Did you like it?
Yeah, I did. It was a lot to take in because I went, at 17. So it was like a lot of new experiences, but I felt like it was very useful, and I got a lot out of it, and I'm really grateful that I went there. And I actually feel like the independent study prepared me to be able to focus while I was there at such a young age. But yeah, it was good.
What factored in the decision to go to Berklee?
It kind of felt like it happened for me because I was actually thinking about just staying in an ashram that I was living at when I was 16, and I wasn't going to go to college. And then my parents said that I had to go to college, and so I applied only to Berklee, and I got in, and so.
But isn't Berklee kind of like the opposite of an ashram?
I don't know if it's the opposite, but it actually has some similarities to it. Or at least the ashram that I was in, it was like a very musical place. And I wasn't in like the main part of the ashram. I was there studying yoga and just living there, and I really enjoyed it and wanted to stay there, but I'm glad that I went to Berklee. And actually, in hindsight, like the teachings at the ashram, besides the yoga, are not in alignment with who I am at all, and it doesn't resonate with me at all. But I really liked the yoga teaching.
What particular values were not in alignment with who you are?
It's just it was a very traditional, like Hare Krishna temple, and they have really beautiful ceremonies, like a lot of singing and dancing, but the way, like the more conservative, like religion aspect of it, didn't really resonate with me.
Were you raised in any particular religious tradition?
No, it was pretty open in my household to us discovering our own beliefs. Meditation was a really big part of my family. My parents have always had a practice of meditating twice a day, and growing up, they asked us to meditate with them until we were 10, and then decide at age 10 if we wanted to continue or not. And it was always really short. It was like they would meditate longer, and we would meditate for like 10 minutes or something like that.
Was there a particular type of meditation that they employed?
They have their own practice, but they just showed us to follow our breath, just to watch our breath.
Did you enjoy meditation as a young person?
I felt like it was really impactful for listening. I think it was one of the things that helped me discover listening.
So when you were in school, what did you study at Berklee?
I studied sound engineering and composition, and then my instrument was guitar, classical guitar.
Did you have any sort of ambition for what you wanted to do when you finished school?
Yeah, I mean, at that time, I wanted to compose for orchestras, um, and and just had all of these thoughts that when I got out of school, I'd find a job composing for orchestras, and
Like you'd go in the newspaper under the orchestra section?
right? No, I thought from the school connections, because they were connected with like the Boston Symphony and like all these things. I don't know. I just had thoughts that that would happen, and I was already my job while I was there was I was a stage manager at a Live Nation venue, and then I also worked in production at the Boston Pops, like when they would do the changeover. And so my ambition was to do that. But then school ended, um, and I got a job on a tour, and was just doing like live sound on the tour. And then
Whose
after
tour?
the well, it's kind of a funny thing. It's this thing. It still makes me laugh. It's this thing called Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp.
So
And
that's
they
for like
came.
older, it's for
Yeah,
middle-aged men basically to go
yeah,
play with like the bass player of Styx or something.
yeah, pretty much. And they came to Berkeley, and they were wanting to hire people who were working at the venue next door. Um, and so I got that job, and it paid really well. And then it took me away from Boston, and I ended up in San Francisco. And so the orchestra connections weren't there, and my ambitions totally changed.
The hardest fight I find to know your name is owning it and all that it contains. And if I let go of holding on to my ego, will you let go too? This cold hits you in the face when I someplace.
Well, there were a few different steps, and I won't bore you with all of them. But I traveled a lot after landing in San Francisco, and then started to just write songs on classical guitar, and just kind of reduce my composition ideas just more to like singer songwriter style, and would perform that, and still didn't feel like it was really me, but it was what I had access to. And then I moved back to Orcas Island and decided to give up on music completely, and I got rid of my guitar and was just going to focus on farming and homesteading. And I had a job at a few of the farms next door, and not even a few days went by after I made that decision of giving up music, where my neighbor lent me a Buchla 100, and I had no idea what that was and had never played a synthesizer before. And that just opened up a whole new world to me. And having just gone through giving up on music, it opened up this new space within myself of not having ambitions and not having pressure. And it helped me find my current trajectory with music, which I still feel like I'm finding. And it's helped me to to constantly try and come back to that place of like after every album, I'm like, okay, I give up. And to me now, giving up is just like surrendering to not knowing what the next thing is. But yeah, sorry if that was a really long answer.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And you know, I feel like lots of folks that I've had on this program describe a similar cycle, you know, where you're incubating an idea and it feels like depression or it feels like you've given up, but the more you do it, then you start to recognize that it's just kind of like one of the seasons. It's like a creative winter.
Yeah, I know. And it's kind of neat. Like the more you do it, the more you realize giving up is just like relaxing. Like you're just like coming back into the present moment.
Was there an event that made you want to give up music in the first place?
It was just, you know, being without a job and not feeling inspired by the guitar anymore. Feeling like it was really limited with the sounds, and it didn't feel like my musical expression.
So what about the Buchla resonated with you in a way that other instruments hadn't previously?
You know, I return to that question a lot because I also get asked it a lot, and I ask myself it a lot. And there's just something about its resonance that it feels like it resonates with my internal sound. Like, you know, because I feel like every capsulated source of energy is making sound within it because it has just like energy bouncing off of boundaries. And so I feel like when I first started playing it, it amplified that sound within me because it felt like it was a similar resonance. And yeah, I don't know, actually. I think also just, and this kind of goes back to the album that I just released, where I say that it's like my love album for electricity, and I think the way that Buchla instruments are made, and they have just really interesting components that are different in each one, and a lot of those components aren't even available anymore. And they hold electricity in this really, I guess I'll use the word potent again, like this really potent way. And it made me feel really close to electricity. And it began that relationship for me of like, oh wow, I'm making sound with electricity. This is really beautiful.
Do you think of playing guitar as making sound with electricity?
Now I do, but then I didn't, because it began my journey of, because even though I studied sound engineering, I studied it on like I approached it from a different perspective than I do now with sound, where having that experience with the Buchla made me start to really dive deeper into like what is sound, like how is sound made, and trying to understand it in my own words and in others' words. And I feel like when I was studying sound engineering, there was just so much information that understanding sound was like a quick fundamentals thing, and I didn't really dive deeply into it. Did that answer that?
Yeah, I guess it's
Okay.
lucky that your neighbor happened to have a Buchla synth when you were
It's incredibly
on an island.
lucky.
Is
Yeah.
it lucky or is it fate intervening? Like, what does your worldview tell you?
I feel like I have some sort of, I don't really know the language around it because I change my language around like magnetism often, but I feel like I have some sort of work to do with electricity, because because after I left the island, then I moved to another small town and I didn't have a synthesizer. And then it like kind of found me again. And it started to feel like rare synthesizers kept finding me. And I was like, okay, I guess like this is what I'm supposed to do right now.
Did you ever meet Don Buchla?
I did. Yeah. Yeah. I met him briefly, from a friend. He was very nice.
I was in a band, and we were touring with a band that had Ezra Buchla, Don's son, in it, and we stayed over at his house one time.
Oh, neat.
But I don't really remember much.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know Ezra, but when I met Don, he was a very, very kind person.
Your new album comes out on May 15th, and you've made the deliberate choice to keep that release date and put it out during the time of this pandemic. But I wonder if you can tell me about the process of making it. Earlier, you mentioned that you've recognized that you give up before you make any new album. Did that happen this time?
Yeah. Yeah, it did happen. And to be honest, it was actually the hardest out of all of the times that I've given up. It took the longest to recover, and I guess I use that word recover because it felt like I had a lot of healing to do, and it felt like I had to kind of not completely, but grasp like a pretty substantial understanding of my life up until now to kind of make room for new stuff. And it had a bigger dip than other times that I've had, the like give up period, where I kind of experienced a like existential depression while touring a few years ago, where I just felt very depleted and burned out, and just felt like I had taken my life in the wrong direction, and that lifestyle wasn't sustainable for me, and that I wasn't going to be able to make music if I kept doing that lifestyle, because I can't really make music from an emotional place. And so I came home.
What were the indicators of that?
I mean, I had a lot of health issues that thankfully are not an issue anymore. But I had ulcers, and I was like losing my hair. I like had insomnia. I lost a lot of weight, and like it was just like all the manifestations of extreme stress and like exhaustion. And yeah, so it took a lot of like investigating how to physically, emotionally heal, and just constantly ask myself like, what is a sustainable way to move forward with this so that I can keep making music from a place of joy and enjoy my life. That was like the big thing for me, was that I really wanted to keep doing this, but do it in a way where I enjoy every moment, because I love performing and I love sharing music with people, but the traveling and all the stuff that happens before that, like hour or 2 hours of performance, is really exhausting.
Had it gotten to the point where you weren't even enjoying the performance itself?
Sometimes, like, it depends on how sleep deprived I was. But yeah, there were definitely some performances like that.
So how did you answer that question of how to make this a more sustainable life, and how to, work in such a way where you're enjoying every moment of it?
Yeah. I guess that's why I said that it was like an existential depression, was because I had to, or it's been a process and is still an ongoing process that I am checking in with every day, of of like, why am I alive? Like, what makes me remember like my joy, and what are the things that that make me feel closer to that joy and remembering who I am, and what are the things that take me away from that, and just trying to constantly filter each day the things that take me away from it, and try and fill it with the things that bring me closer to it. And it's been a big discovery process,
And
because it
then,
was a lot of things that I wasn't doing at that time.
so what have you started doing that you weren't doing at that time?
I mean, handstands were like a really big one. And then having a constant relationship with plants, and then spending more time writing, like writing words, and a lot more time meditating, like returning back to meditating, and a lot more time having like more of a student teacher relationship, of being a student again, and and yeah, there's kind of been a lot, like a deeper relationship with food, and with understanding like how food can be medicine, and how the body can regenerate itself when it's given the right environment and the right nutrients. So yeah, making room for all of those things.
When did you start feeling inspired to create music again?
It happened all of a sudden, and I'll never forget it, because I think it's my most profound memory, or my most profound like feeling of it. Like, felt like I all of a sudden heard, like, it's kind of hard for me to explain. I'm going to try and explain it, but I feel like I don't have the proper language to explain it, and so I think that's why I made this album, was because that's like the language for me to explain it. But it was just all of a sudden, it felt like a gong was hit inside of me, and I heard like the whole album at once, and it was just like a light switch got turned on, and it was like, it felt like all of my versions of me, like my physical, mental, and emotional, had reached like a rejuvenation mode, that they were like now ready to receive inspiration. And it just came on in such a strong way, like the strongest I've ever felt in my life. And it was just like full of this feeling of like kindness and love, and joy. And I feel like those three words can often be platitudes, and that's why it like doesn't even feel like the right way to explain the feeling by using this language. But I don't know if that answered that.
Yeah. Well, how do you feel right now?
I feel good. I feel in this moment, I feel peaceful, and feel good. Earlier today, I was kind of starting to feel that like collective sadness feeling, of just, what's going to happen in the future, and just trying to think about what I can do today to help myself and to help others, and make those small steps.
Now that you've completed an album, are you feeling the pull to give up music again?
Not quite yet, because there's a few more aspects to this album that haven't been shared yet. And so it still feels like I'm in it. It still feels like I'm making it.
What are you hopeful for?
Yeah, I don't know if I don't quite have an answer for what am I hopeful for, but I'm feeling hope around seeing some of some of the things that are happening to our lives in LA, like at least in my life and the people that are close to me, of having to get food again from a small farm and like getting a farm box and having to spend time with just one person at a time and to just slow down and listen and take more notice of like the birds and like, the space in between. And I feel like that, that space feels really rejuvenating, but I also am aware that that's not everyone's perspective and not everyone's situation right now. And I feel really grateful and fortunate that I, am still able to work right now and that I have food and a home. And so it kind of oscillates between that. And I'm definitely hopeful for just people feeling like they have food. That's a concern on my mind right now. But does that answer that? Yeah.
What do you think about most throughout the day?
Yeah, these are fun questions. It changes from day to day and week to week. But today, I guess the thing that's been reoccurring is I've been thinking a lot about earthquakes, and not in a way where I'm like afraid of an earthquake happening, but just like wanting to learn more about the way that the earth releases tension and just kind of wanting to understand more about earthquakes. And it was really fascinating to look up like that the average amount of earthquakes per day is usually 50, but right now it's above 150 each day. And I just found that really, really fascinating. And just thinking about myself, like when I'm feeling a lot of pressure and there needs to be pressure released, and like the earth doing that with earthquakes. And it just made me want to understand more about them, because I feel like I always learn a lot about myself by understanding how nature works. So I've been thinking about that a lot.
How do personal earthquakes manifest in your life?
Probably panic is the thing that comes up for me of I guess I think of myself sometimes as like having like an inner family, and there's one part of my like inner family system that likes to yell out a bunch of questions when it doesn't know what's coming up next, and which has to do with like what we were talking about earlier on, like the preparation thing, and I'm still learning how to connect with that side of myself, but it manifests through panic often.
Well, that's the part of you that would have kept you alive when you needed to forage for food, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's for sure the practical side of it. And then there's like the rational version of it.
Who else is in your inner family?
Right now I only have 3 members.
Do you name them?
I don't name them. They seem to become more like in union when with my current self when I'm done listening to them, like when they feel heard.
Right, because if you don't listen to them, it's not like they just go away. They just get more loud.
Yeah. And that's like when the panic one happens for me is if I don't listen to it. But yeah, right now I have 3. What about you? I want to ask you all these questions.
You're going to have to come back.
I know. Yeah.
Wait, so it's the panic, and then who else?
I have the other two are actually more positive ones. Like they feel almost like my grandparents. Not like my literal grandparents, but they feel like they just have a really nurturing voice. And one is like constantly saying to me, like, it's okay, honey, it's okay. So there's that one, the constant, like, it's okay. And I think that one's talking to the panic one a lot. And then I have another one that is constantly like, oh, what'll happen if this and this go together? It's like obsessed with things combining. That one I'm having fun with, but we haven't really started a conversation. It's fun to talk about these like inner conversations.
So you mentioned before that you've been thinking about how food can be like medicine. So what are you having for dinner tonight?
Well, I try to listen to my body and don't follow a schedule of like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and just listen for when it wants nutrients, and then I just wait for like an image to come or a craving to come, and it changes all the time. Like sometimes my body will get really fixated on like one thing, and it'll be like, I only want grapes, like only give me grapes for a week. And I've done that before, and it actually felt amazing, and it helped a lot of things. And then sometimes I'll crave like things like bone broth and that stuff. But it changes all the time. And I don't really think about, at this current moment, I don't think about food, like planning ahead with what I'm going to make, unless it's like some sort of big soup type thing. But I try and just let my body tell me instead of putting my own taste bud ideas onto it right now.
Man, I was really hoping that you were going to say, well, my body is telling me that it wants Flamin Hot Cheetos and a Mountain Dew.
Definitely does not want that. Yeah, I actually have.
Medicine, otherwise known as Flamin Hot Cheetos.
Yeah. I actually got put into the hospital when I was a kid because of red food coloring. And there's a lot of kids that get put into hospitals because of red food coloring that's in Flaming Hot Cheetos.
Well, Kaitlyn, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for all of your great questions.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.